Hello, friends. Chris Whitten here. Glad to be back with you. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about a real legend in country music, especially Texas music, a fellow by the name of Johnny Rodriguez. As some of you might be aware, Johnny passed away over the weekend, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to remember him and share a few stories. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with Johnny a few times, and it seemed like he was always popping up somewhere where I was. You know, he would frequently come and hang out at shows, especially down in the South Texas area. So let's go ahead and share a few stories about Johnny and remember him. And without further ado, let's dive right in. So I first met Johnny Rodriguez shortly after I moved to Austin, which was about a year or so after he was acquitted of the murder charges. Some of y'all may know the story about that. He had shot an acquaintance of his in his hometown there in Sabinal, and it was ultimately deemed to be in self-defense. Johnny was startled by him, I guess, thought he was an intruder and had shot him. So I don't know that Johnny was in a real good place at that time, and it's well known that he had his demons and battles with addiction over the years and so forth. So I think that made all of that worse, what he had gone through with being accused of murder and so forth. It's real funny. I always found Johnny to be a very polite, very happy, very nice guy. I can say that right off the bat. I never saw him act angry or hard to deal with or anything like that. You never really knew where you were going to see him either. It was pretty funny to me. I couldn't count how many times I've been at Soundcheck at different places and somebody from the bar would come up and say, "Hey, Johnny Rodriguez is in town. He wants to come over and hang out. He's supposed to be here in a little bit." So that was probably the majority of the times I saw Johnny, it was under those circumstances, and he was always very pleasant. Usually he'd get up on stage and do a couple of songs with whoever I was working with, usually with Kevin Fowler, and then later on with Ace and the whole band. I always had to give Johnny a lot of credit because, in the music business, you tend to run across a lot of folk who have their demons and their issues and the things that they're dealing with in their life, and they don't always go about dealing with those issues in the most constructive fashion. And a lot of times people who are in a place like that can be very hard to deal with. Some of them can be pretty dark, pretty angry at times. And as I said, Johnny was never that guy. Johnny was very nice. He was very fun-loving. He enjoyed just having a good time and hanging out. He liked to talk about music. Over the years, I had the opportunity to sit and just visit with him a little bit here and there. Granted, I will admit he wasn't always the most coherent to carry on a conversation with at times, but he was definitely just a nice guy, and I always appreciated him for his talent and just for being that guy. He could have went and locked himself away or just been very hard to deal with, and he was never like that. I remember in the mid-2000s, we'd see him from time to time. I remember we were actually headlining at the Heart of Texas Fair and Rodeo there in Waco, Texas, and we generally had about 8,500 to 9,000 people in that show, and Johnny Rod was opening for us. Of course, you never knew what time he was going to get there. Soundcheck could be a little disorganized, but he had a lady friend who would drive him around, and they had a big yellow Hummer with all the chrome on it, and so you always could see him coming from a mile away. I remember he pulled up backstage, parked next to the door of our bus, and this was probably no more than 45 minutes before he was scheduled to take the stage. He got out and had the door open, got his clothes together there, and started trying to get dressed. Of course, it was getting kind of dark, so nobody could really see him back there. But, I thought, man, this guy, he's a legend, and this is kind of undignified. So I said, "Hey, Johnny, would you like to go on the bus? You're more than welcome to use our bathroom and, come in and change and relax for a minute, cool off. It's pretty warm out here." So he thanked me and followed me inside and went in and got dressed, got ready, and we sat there and visited for a few minutes before he had to get ready to head on to the stage. And so most of my interactions with him were things like that, of that nature. I remember a few years back, and I have the only picture that I know of that I have Johnny and I together we were on stage together. The famous bullfighter Leon Coffey had suffered a bout with meningitis and was in pretty bad shape at the time. And this had to have been probably 12, 14 years ago. They decided to have a benefit fundraiser for Leon there at the Tejas Brothers Rodeo Arena, northwest part of San Antonio on the outskirts of town. And they booked us, the Ace in the Hole band, to play, and then they also had Johnny come in. So Johnny was just going to get up with us, and I think he was scheduled to do 5 or 6 songs, kind of, a greatest hits type deal. We did, of course, Pass Me By and Ride My Thumb to Mexico, and all of those classic tunes of Johnny's. And I remember that day very specifically because we were having horrible sound issues. I don't remember the name of the sound company. I was not familiar with them. None of us were actually. But these guys were apparently not real knowledgeable when it came to running sound. It was a bit of a mess the whole time. I know I've never heard low-end feedback and feedback off of a kick drum the way I did that night. And that's something that really stood out to me. We had a horrible sound check. All the guys were getting really irritated with these guys. And it was really bad, too, that these sound men came up to us and said they didn't know what was going on and asked us if we knew. And we're like, man, we're musicians. We're not sound engineers, we're doing our job. You need to do your job. And I remember Benny MacArthur telling them, said, I tell you what, Johnny ain't going to like this when he gets here. Y'all need to get this figured out. We finished our sound check, kind of got to a place as far as we could with it, and went ahead and got off stage. Then they had a little cabin facility on the property that we went to just to kind of use as a green room and get dressed and everything. And those guys continued to work on that PA plumb up until showtime that night. I remember Johnny got there probably about an hour before we went on stage, so he came back there to that little cottage that we were in, and we sat around. He had a drink and just visited. It was nice to sit there with those guys, with the Ace in the Hole guys, with Johnny, because obviously they had known him going back to his heyday in the 1970s and had a long history with him. So it was great to hear the conversations that went back and forth and remembrances of different shows and things that had happened many, many years before. I did get to hear Johnny talk about Lefty Frizzell and that he was there the night that Lefty first played That's the Way Love Goes, which I thought was kind of interesting. A few years ago, I was visiting with Merle Haggard's son, Marty Haggard. He told me the story that confirmed, Johnny's story. It all kind of fit together, that they were all in a hotel room in Nashville. I think there was quite a few songwriters there, and I believe Lefty was wanting somebody to cut that song. He had just finished the song, and I think he really wanted Merle to cut it, but Merle had just completed an album, and Haggard, of course, really looked up to Lefty, and knowing that Lefty hadn't really had a hit in a few years, Merle just told him, I'm not going to record that song. Lefty, you need to record it and have a hit with it. It's a great song. And eventually, as Johnny Rod said, he said that Lefty called him Regis. And he said, well, why don't I just get old Regis over there to record it? So that's eventually what did happen. Marty did tell me that about 10 years later, after Lefty had passed, Lefty's widow had called Merle, and she was having some financial issues, and Marty had learned the song because he loved it so much and was such a big fan of Lefty's, and so they were out on tour, and at Soundcheck, Merle came up to Marty and said, hey, I need you to teach me that Lefty tune. I'm going to go ahead and record it and get his widow some mailbox money. So she's kind of hurting at the moment, so... which he ultimately did. But Johnny Rod did record it back, a good 10 years before that, and had a hit with it there in the early 70s, shortly after it was written. Of course, we were worried about how the sound issues were going to work out that night. When we got on stage, we had no idea if these guys had figured anything out with it. It was better by the time we took the stage, but it still was far from perfect, or far from what it should have been at the very least. And we were concerned, how Johnny Rod would react once he got on stage with the issues that we were having. But bless his heart, he got up there and he sang his songs, and we had a wonderful time. Like I said, I think he did maybe 5 or 6 tunes with us that night, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. I hate telling other people's stories, but this was such a funny story. I wanted to go ahead and relate it regarding Johnny Rod. And this wasn't too long ago. This was maybe 6, 7 years ago. A friend of mine who was a band leader and owned a dance hall in the Austin area, just outside of Austin, had been trying to get a hold of Johnny Rod to book him there at the dance hall. And I believe he'd been calling and leaving messages for him for at least 3 months. And of course, he and Johnny Rod had gone back years. They'd known each other probably longer than I'd been alive. Several times I'd heard my friend complain that he was having issues getting a hold of Johnny. So finally one day I showed up at the dance hall to play a gig, and my buddy came up to me and he said, "Well, finally heard from Johnny Rod. I actually almost shot him the other night." And I said, "Huh? What happened?" He said, "Well, the story went like this. Apparently Johnny Rod had been playing a show up in Fort Worth, and of course he lived down in the San Antonio area, I think out around Bandera and that general vicinity, but he had played this show in Fort Worth, and my friend actually lived in a house across the road from his dance hall, and everybody knew that. He said that he woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning to somebody hammering on his door, and of course he jumped out of bed in his underwear, grabbed a gun, and headed for the door thinking, this is it. Something bad's about to happen or is happening. When he ran up and pulled the door open, lo and behold, there stood Johnny Rod. And he said, "Johnny, what are you doing here?" And Johnny said, "I was just wondering, do we have a date on the books?" And of course, he said he relaxed then and started laughing. He said, "No, man, I've been trying to get a hold of you for 4 months and hadn't heard back from you." So he goes, "But even though it's 4 in the morning, since you're here and available, let's go ahead and pull out a calendar and figure this out and get a date on the books." So he ended up booking a date with Johnny Rod at 4 o'clock in the morning, but I always thought that was pretty funny. And like I said, you just never knew when and where he was going to pop up or pop in. I guess he was passing through and thought about my friend and thought about the club, and I guess, I don't know, maybe he had heard that he had gotten the messages and couldn't remember if he'd called him back and booked a date or not. But that's just how Johnny Rod was. Anyway, I have a few other stories that involve some stuff that I saw that I think would be in bad taste. It's kind of neither here nor there with him. Nothing really bad, but kind of irrelevant, and I just didn't keep those to myself. But, like I said, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that Johnny Rod really was a great fella, and I always enjoyed him. I always enjoyed visiting with him, and always enjoyed his music. I thought he was great. But anyway, I think that'll do it for today. As always, I appreciate all the feedback that I get about these stories and this channel. And if there's anything you would like to hear about, please let me know. I always read all the comments, and I really appreciate it. And if you haven't, please go down below, click that like and subscribe button. Of course, if you click that little bell notification, the little icon down there, it will notify you whenever I upload a new video. I generally upload videos every Wednesday and a few in between here and there whenever I have time. Of course, if you need any violin, fiddle, or mandolin tracks recorded, let me know. I'd love the opportunity to work with you and see what kind of magic we could make. Also, if you're interested in violin or fiddle lessons, please let me know. We can do those remotely and work around your schedule and make it real simple. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and keep on picking.